Yeah, so I wanted to start showing off a little bit of the stress testing that I've done on the MMO that I've been working on called Eldevar Online. So I'm going to do a couple of tests here. I just kicked one off, so this is more of a client stress test, so you're going to be able to see um, about 200 and... Oh, I don't actually have it. I'm glad I checked. About 280 players on screen here once they start spawning in. Actually, what you just saw here, this is one of the optimizations I guess I have for mobile, especially for lower quality phones. It's not worth trying to min-max and optimize having like thousands of players on screen. So that's an option for people with just, worse hardware. Obviously, the performance isn't great with this many players around, so network load-wise, it's still not terrible. We're getting, this is, probably can still be optimized a little bit more, but we're looking at, 20 kilobytes a second or so. In terms of like data actually going out. Our out's still really low. That's just what we're receiving. So yeah, the way that it works is characters, they get funneled into channels here. So channels have a cap of like, I think they're 400 right now or something like that. And then, but once a channel hits a certain percentage, it starts funneling players into other channels. The reason for that is so, if you wanted to go and hop into another channel, because your friends are over there or whatever, you're not just like blocked out from doing that. There's still overhead, but just to distribute load a little bit more. You can also freely hop to channels with no one in it too, right? So there's always like a minimum amount of channels. And then when I show it a little bit more in the deeper stress test, we'll see that more channels will I don't know if we'll have enough people actually to spin that up, but because the channel caps are so large, we'll see though. But yeah, you can see here, once we're just kind of standing still, the network load is pretty light. We go down to, a few kilobytes a second, which still can be optimized. This is all like raw binary getting moved across, so it's just there's a decent amount of enemies. We can tighten like LODs and stuff like that, so this is, all of this over here that we're essentially getting data for when we're over in the town, which isn't necessarily needed. So I'm going to rerun that same performance test and then show the actual server-side logs of what's going on over there. So let me get that pulled up while the bots spawn in. So this is the server logs here. So there's not going to be a lot of noise, but this specifically is kind of what we're going to look at. There's telemetry built into it, so we can start seeing when ticks are overflowing, what ticks are costing a lot, what the actual tick rate is. So the target tick rate is 33. So you can see here we're still at 33 ticks a second. And then there's dynamic scaling back of the tick rates. So essentially what will happen is if the server detects that we're going over budget on a lot of ticks, it will it'll dynamically decrease the tick rate to ensure the game's still smooth, because when you go over budget on ticks, that's what actually causes rubber banding. So it would be better, it's a better player experience to have slower ticks rather than going over budget and having rubber banding happen, especially when the rubber banding is like 300 or 400 milliseconds. So you can see here we are still operating at pretty solid tick rates here. The P95 of our ticks is 8.2, so we're still at our target 33 hertz. For the game, that's basically fine. It goes down to 4 hertz, and then at 4 hertz, it sends out a signal that basically says, hey, we need to scale up servers. That's not implemented yet, obviously. It's like the code is built there, but the infrastructure for it hasn't been fully built yet. Mainly because there's not really a point, because there's not enough players to warrant that. One like $150 box can probably support like 10 to 15,000 players. Honestly, the biggest struggle is going to be the egress traffic. You can see here, we're sending like 11 megabytes out. That's to 400 clients, so like when you break it down, it's not a lot. But there's definitely some optimizations that can happen there. But yeah, the egress traffic is specifically what gets a little bit expensive, or can get expensive, so that's where we have to be careful. So I'm going to run a bigger load test now. So this isn't mainly for the client. This is to actually see the stress on the server. So I'm going to push, what we just saw was 400 players. I am going to push it to 4,000 so we can see what that looks like on the server. But you can see with the 400 players, we basically never even dipped below. Our P99 was basically always within under 50 milliseconds, or under 33 milliseconds, which is our goal. So over here on the left, this is the bot client, or the stress test client, and then over here on the right is the actual server logs. So right now we have 4,000 players coming into the server, so we should start seeing a sizable slowdown here, both on tick rate, and you can see here a bunch of channels dynamically stood up, which is pretty cool. The server probably is struggling right now. Yeah, so you can see we're kind of over budget here. You know, just due to the amount of players standing in such a small area across, we're just sending all this data. So it does start falling apart around 4,000 players. However, partly the reason this looks so glitchy is that's how the stress bots operate. So the game should still be playable-ish. You know, it's not a fantastic experience, but the server is still usable under this much load. You can really see the tick right there when we're looting and stuff like that. Just how slow it is, but it is still definitely playable. There's a lot of interpolation that happens on the client side to kind of make stuff a little bit smoother, even though we're not getting like direct position updates. Essentially, when the pathfinding works, it sends off the bot's pathfinding to you, or the mouse pathfinding to you, and then it only updates. And I can tell right now the bot's must have disconnected because the server is way smoother again. But yeah, you can see just like that, it scales back out. We can actually pull open the server logs here. I probably won't have anything useful because of all the disconnects. Yeah, nothing super useful here. But yeah, I can tell the game got substantially smoother. So now one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bump up the channel limit and just stress test having like 10,000 players on screen just to show you guys what that looks like. Okay, cool. So I just kicked it off now with 2,000 bots. So last time we ran 4,000, now this is 2,000. But I upped the channel size to 1,600, so we should see a lot more players come up on our screen. Our FPS is probably going to go down to single digits. Partly the reason is the way animations are working right now is it has to run the entire node tree and rebuild the character every time. I'm working on moving it to GPU renderer, but there's other things that are more important than focusing on that because I don't know how much it matters to have, you know, this many players on screen. You know, my goal was to obviously have it be, actually there's a big network pull here too that's impacting FPS. That's definitely room for optimization. But you can see here there's lots of room for optimization with all these players here, but it's possible and the game doesn't fall over. And you know, I'm eventually going to work towards it, but I don't want to prematurely optimize for, you know, crowds this large, for example. When this exists, right, where if you really needed to cut it down, you could just do something like this and it loads the closest players to you. Or, you know, B, right, there's already the natural size limit in the channel itself. As laggy as the game is, though, the server itself should still be holding up fine. So, like, if I were to attack this guy, yeah, you can see here, like, combat and stuff is still totally fine. It's just specifically client FPS, and then, you know, everyone disconnects and we're back to normal. But yeah, that's kind of where the performance of the game is at. I wanted to talk about this early because I see a lot of people showing off MMOs and they don't show like anything that's actually like performance testing the game or like, you know, other people being around. So yeah, if anyone's interested in playtesting, let me know. My goal was content complete for the first area June 30th. That's probably not going to happen. So probably mid-July is when I'm going to start having this, you know, have the option for some closed playtesting. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely feel free to leave a comment and let me know. But thanks for watching, and yeah, hopefully this looks interesting to some people.